All right, friends. So I made this kind of scale visualizer. So pretty nerdy today. I'm not sure what application it has to actually making you play music better, but it certainly helped me think about scales in a different way. So it's kind of almost mathy, right? So I'll show you what I've done here. I have made a circle. This is a circle of fifths, but in kind of a weird way. So instead of going C, G, D, A, I'm just saying one is going to be whatever the first degree of the scale is. So in this case, C. We're going to start with just C major scale. So this would correspond to 1, C, 5, G, 2, D. So as you look around this, all the white keys, right? So none of the flats and sharps around this. But if you went all the way around this, this would actually be a full circle of fifths if you start here on C. So C, G, D, A, E, B, and then F sharp, right? F sharp's sharp 4. So that's all the way around the circle, back down to B flat, F, and to C. So it's kind of an interesting way of plotting it. So I've plotted all of the notes on the scale, and then we can rotate this shape around. So if you look like this, and it's going to come up with some kind of interesting things. So let me kind of show you for the major, and then we'll walk through some of these other scales and even triads and intervals. You can do the same thing. These just have 3 points and 2 points, but we'll get to that. So if you take the major scale, C major, so a rotation, what does this do? This is all the modes of the major scale. So if you look like Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian. So what this means is all the modes of the scale that start on C. So let's start here actually. And then as we rotate this shape to the left around, you're going to see what this does. So this scale is the mode Lydian, right? So if we take G major, right, has an F sharp in it, and we start on the C, right? The fourth mode of that scale, right? We end up with that, the Lydian mode. So what happens if we rotate it? We rotate this left. Okay, we end up with all the collection of like C major, right? So we've gone up a circle of fifths. So we've rotated this scale to orient to C major. So we went from G, now we're going to C. So G to C. Maybe you can guess what happens next. If we rotate it again, we're going to go to the collection notes that matches to F major. So this is going to be the Mixolydian mode, right? F major. C, start on C, has a B flat in it. And so forth. So we can only get the rotations of the scales that have a C in it, right? So G, C, F. The next one is going to be B flat, right? The Dorian, because that's the C is the 2 of B flat, and so forth. So we're just going to rotate around. So that was B flat. Now this is E flat, C minor, your Aeolian mode. E flat, then A flat, your Phrygian mode, right? We're just going around the circle of fifths. So we have B flat, E flat, A flat, and then D flat. And then we're going to have to skip around because we can only use scales that actually have a C in it. So after D flat is G flat, and G flat does not have a C in it. So we can't use any mode of G flat to represent this rotation here. So then we're going to skip back around to where we started, G. Right, the G collection of G major notes, but starting on a C, what we call Lydian mode. So I thought that was very interesting way of thinking about scales and modes and kind of a nice graphical representation. So you can poke around this. I'll put the link of this, what this is, in the bottom of this is on my website, this Scale Explorer. And you can plot pentatonic scales. All right, and you can rotate them around. Yeah, I'm not quite sure the implications here. Anyway, it gets a little interesting. So if we take like a dominant bebop scale, right, you'll see that it has a couple halves. Let's see here. Yeah, some half steps in here. There's B flat to B to C to, right? Let's reset the rotation. So here we go. So, right, it's like your dominant bebop scale that has the half step between A, the flatted seventh, the sixth flatted seventh, and the natural seventh. Or the bebop scale has the half step on the like the flat six. So anyway, some interesting shapes, and you can rotate them around. It's kind of interesting to see what they do. Okay, and if you click on the keyboard, you could put your bass note somewhere else. So let's go back to major. You can see that a little easier because we're all familiar with that a little better. So yeah, here's E major. Here's E flat major, D major, that kind of thing, right? Okay, so those scales, these are kind of scales you're maybe most familiar with. Major, pentatonic, blues scale, that kind of stuff. Let's move on to these symmetric. And I call them symmetric because the pattern in this circle here is going to be symmetrical. So let's take an easy one here. Whole tone. Just all whole tones. Let's start on C. So you're just going up a whole step. So we got 6 notes, and then it starts again. So you see, it produces a symmetrical shape. What happens if we rotate this? Like nothing happens, right? Because if we rotate it, we know the whole tone scales are kind of interchangeable, right? If you take a C scale and you take that and you start on a D, well, it's like the same scale, right? Right? That collection of notes does not change, right? To get a different scale, you're going to have to do that like a collection of notes. That's a little yicky. That's kind of yicky too. Anyway, you have double flats and double sharps either way. Okay, so when you rotate this whole tone, it doesn't do anything, right? Because, well, if you take any of those notes and you start on another note of those, so you take this and you start on E, well, you end up with the same collection of notes. It doesn't change. How about diminished scale, or we call octotonic, right? So it's this scale that goes whole, half, or half, whole, half, whole, half, whole, right? So if you see here, we got C to D flat, that's a half step, D flat to E flat, whole step, half step, whole step, and so it alternates. So if we rotate this, what happens? Well, we get the other form of that octotonic scale, or that diminished scale, where it starts with the whole step instead of the half step. So whole, half, whole, half. So and those are the only 2 rotations, right? You just flip back and forth between those 2. So I thought that was interesting because there's really only 2 forms of the diminished scale, right? So you could say those are the modes of the diminished scale. It's kind of weird to think about it that way, but yeah, there's only 2 modes, I guess. BiTriadic. This was kind of a fun one. All right, so I think this BiTriadic, the name comes from like 2 triads stacked together. Now maybe you could correct me. I have to go look that up again. But anyway, it's this kind of recurring pattern where you set up the minor third and the minor second, right? And so when you rotate this, what do you think is going to happen? Well, I think it's just going to go, instead of minor third first, it's going to go minor second first and then go to minor third. And that's what it does. Minor second, minor third, minor second, minor third. And you end up with, and there's only 2 rotations. See that? A diminished 7th chord, right? So now we're kind of getting into chords. And this is also symmetric, right? Because if you take any of these, and your minor composers loved that, Schubert, Franz, Liszt, it was a very vague chord because you could take that diminished 7th chord and you could go from one key to kind of a completely different key really easily. So you see, it just makes a square here. The 1, which is C, the 6 is A, the sharp 4, and the flat 3. So if you rotate this, nothing's going to happen, right? So it's kind of like your whole tone scale. And then how about an augmented triad? I probably should have put this under triads. But this is also symmetrical too. It's a symmetrical triad. If you rotate this, C, this collection of notes, C, E, and A flat, right? If you rotate it, like an inversion, right? The collection of notes doesn't change. And this is also an E augmented triad, right? So E, G sharp, and B sharp maybe. So if we do here, Yeah, if you click on these notes, you end up with the same 3 notes, maybe spelled differently, right? But it's the same thing. And if you rotate this around, it doesn't do anything, right? So some of these symmetric ones, you either have like 1 rotation or like no rotations at all. They're like no inversions that correspond to a different like group of notes. Okay, let's go on to triads. I've kind of already hinted at this, and I've hinted at it that I think a mode is really just a scale inversion, right? Kind of weird to think about, but when you rotate a triad, it's really like a mode of that, right? It's kind of wonky to think about. So let's think this major triad, C major. So usually you think about an inversion of C, E, G, and the next inversion, right? First inversion would be there, right? But if you could think about it, this is a mode E. This is the mode of E triad, right? So what if we took all the, I guess, modes or inversions of all the major triads with a C on it? So I could think of this one, F has a C on the bottom, and then we're going to have one more. So C, F, and probably A flat, where C is the third, right? And so we'll see if that happens. Rotate right. Yep, we got A flat, right? So you're going to have to get triads that have C as the root, C as the third, and C as the fifth. And F, right? And same thing with minor. So we could also pare it down even more. We could go to intervals. So let's take something simple here. The perfect fourth. So like C to an F, right? And what happens if we rotate that? There can only, we get to C to a G, which is interesting because they're inversions of each other, right? So C to F, right? And F to C. Well, we got a fourth here and a fifth here. So we see that in this rotation. So you could say these two versions, this inversion of this interval is actually a mode or something, right? So there's some kind of like interesting relationship between modes and these inversions. So what if we took a minor third? You probably guess what's going to happen. A minor third changes to a minor third changes to a major sixth. Yeah, major sixth. C to A and C to E flat. So there's the minor third, and if you rotate it, you get a major sixth, which, if you know your interval inversions, that's going to make sense to you. So that's all true of all these. When you take these and you rotate them, there's only 2. Except the interval of the diminished fifth. I probably should have put that on here because that's symmetrical. So if you take the C to an F sharp, C to an F sharp, it's just a straight line down, right? It would be this. Maybe I'll add that in here. So there's going to be no rotation of that, right? Like if you swap them, right? It doesn't change how that octave is divided because it divides equally into 6, 12 half steps, and you just cut it in half. That's going to be 6. So if you flip it around, it's not going to make any difference. So there you have it. Kind of nerdy, kind of an interesting way of thinking about scales and triads and intervals and like their modes and inversions. So I hope you enjoyed that. Go play around with it. Again, I don't know if it's going to make you a super good musician, but I think it's kind of interesting to think about and interesting to play with.